Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're going super local, really granular, with the Flint, Michigan City Council meetings
Okay.
from April 2024.
Right.
We've got the minutes from two meetings, April 8th and 22nd.
Okay.
And even in the world of local government, April was a busy month for Flint.
It was city council minutes. I mean, I know it doesn't exactly sound like must-see TV, right?
Yeah.
But trust me on this one.
Yeah.
They give us a really fascinating glimpse into what makes a community tick. You know, you can really see what issues are important to people
Right.
and how decisions are being made.
Yeah, no, I love this stuff. So what jumped out at you when you first looked at these minutes? What was particularly noteworthy?
Well, one thing that really piqued my interest right off the bat was the attendance at the April 8th meeting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the minutes say one person attended virtually, 11 people in person, at Flint City Hall, of course,
Right.
and one council member was absent.
Okay, so even in 2024, that whole virtual versus in-person thing, still a bit of a balancing act.
Absolutely, and it really speaks to this larger challenge that a lot of cities are wrestling with as things become more and more digital.
Right.
You know, we don't know why everyone chose to attend the way they did, but it just sort of hints at all these different factors at play, you know, access, technology, even just how people think about participating in these things these days. It's tricky.
It really is. Now, both the April 8th and 22nd meetings had those public forum segments where, people can go and speak directly to the council, air their grievances, that sort of thing.
Right.
I'm always really interested to see what people bring up in those forums.
Yeah, me too. It's like, taking the temperature of the community. And in the April 8th meeting, there was a resident, a Mr. James Maraglia,
Okay.
who brought up some pretty serious concerns about safety in his neighborhood.
Yeah, he talked about trespassing, theft, even biohazardous waste,
Yeah.
which is a little concerning to say the least.
Yeah, definitely.
And he mentioned getting signatures for a petition, I guess to try to get some renovations done to some nearby apartment buildings. Sounds like he's really trying to rally his neighbors and actually make some changes.
Absolutely. And you know what I like about this really proactive approach? This is a great example of how city council meetings can be like a real avenue for change, you know?
Mhm.
It reminds us that local government isn't some like far off entity. They're accountable to the people they represent.
And speaking of accountability, let's talk zoning.
Okay, yeah.
The April 15th Zoning Board of Appeals meeting really caught my eye because it involved this property at 2957 Carr Street. And this property had come up before.
Oh, really?
Not once, but twice.
Wow, okay.
So the minutes tell us this property is currently being used as a single-family residence, but it's zoned A2.
Interesting. Okay.
And for those of us who aren't fluent in zoning code, what exactly does A2 mean in this situation?
So basically, A2 zoning in Flint usually means you can have multifamily residential use, like duplexes or smaller apartment buildings would be allowed.
Gotcha.
Which is important because it explains why a developer would even be interested in changing how they're using this property.
Right. It adds a layer of intrigue to it all, for
Yeah.
sure. So we've got this developer, Donald Hootling, requesting a use variance, wants to allow multifamily housing, specifically for veterans and seniors. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Commissioner Kia remembered this case. It was before the board back in 2018,
Oh, wow.
and then again in 2022. And specifically notes there was pushback from the community.
Yeah, that's a really classic example of what happens when you try to balance the need for housing, especially for veterans and seniors, with what the current residents want.
Right.
Like people who already live there, they might be worried about property values going down.
Sure.
Or just how the feel of the neighborhood might change.
Yeah, their quality of life, absolutely.
It's tricky.
And it gets even more complicated because we know a previous developer on this same project, they'd already gotten approval for a fence around the property. So that begs the question, why is this new developer running into the same roadblocks?
Right.
Did the plans change? Did the community's concerns evolve somehow?
Yeah, like what's going on here?
It's really interesting.
It is. And unfortunately, the minutes are really vague. They don't give us any answers on that.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It just says that a motion was made and approved, but nothing about what was actually said or any arguments for or against it.
So it's like we're getting a peek behind the curtain, but only just a peek.
Exactly. And it reminds us that even though these minutes can be really insightful,
Right.
they're just a snapshot. You know, they
Yeah.
can't capture everything about this big, messy process.
It's true. And it just makes you think about how much is happening behind the scenes in these local governments,
Yeah,
and how these meetings, even though they can seem kind of procedural and dry, they can really be catalysts for real change.
absolutely. And they also highlight just how important it is for people to actually, get involved.
Right.
I mean, we talked about Mr. Miraglia and the safety concerns, but imagine if he hadn't shown up.
Right.
If he hadn't gone to the effort of getting those signatures and voicing those concerns, who knows?
Yeah, exactly.
It makes you wonder how many other problems just go completely unaddressed because, well, people aren't even aware these forums exist, or they just don't think they can make a difference,
Yeah, it's easy to feel disconnected from these local governments, right? Like your voice doesn't really matter, or that these meetings are just for some kind of insiders club.
Right.
But Mr. Moralia is a perfect example of how even one person speaking up can have a real impact.
Exactly. And these meetings, they're not just for show. This is a chance for people to hold their elected officials accountable, to fight for the things that matter to them.
Absolutely. And even if you can't physically be there in person, a lot of cities, Flint included, they're putting the minutes online. Some even live stream the whole thing, which is great.
It's amazing, right? You can be sitting at home in your pajamas and still see what's going on with your local government.
Exactly.
It's almost like civic education in a way,
Yeah.
because by seeing how these meetings work, how decisions get made, how all the different sides are considered, people get a much better grasp on how their city actually runs, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about citizen engagement, but these minutes also give us a really interesting look at how the council itself operates internally.
Hmm.
We see motions being made, seconded, discussed, voted on. It's like watching the gears of government turning in front of you.
It is. And what's so interesting is that if you look at the April 22nd meeting, the focus kind of shifts,
Oh, okay.
It's not so much about zoning or public safety anymore.
Right,
It's all about the city's finances.
right. You get into the nitty-gritty there. The minutes mentioned that they reviewed financial statements, even highlighted the city's total revenue, which was $375,000. So for those of us who aren't, financial wizards, what does that number even tell us? Is that a lot? A little? Put it in perspective.
Well, the thing is, the minutes don't really give us the full context to say for sure whether that $375,000 is significant or not. Like, is that monthly revenue? Quarterly?
Oh, right. Makes a difference.
Huge difference. And we don't know how that compares to their budget or how they were doing financially before. So it's really hard to judge based on just that number alone.
So we can't really jump to any conclusions, but the fact that the council is honing in on revenue, it suggests that they're being very careful with their money, maybe even facing some tough budget choices,
Yeah.
right? And that makes me think back to Mr. Miraglia's concerns about safety and needing those renovations.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. Yeah.
Because it raises the question of, are there enough resources to go around? If the city's on a tight budget, that could mean tough choices about fixing infrastructure, improving safety, funding those essential services.
Absolutely. It's all connected.
It is. It's like these separate issues,
Yeah.
zoning, public safety, finances, they're all intertwined. It's like this giant puzzle, right? And each piece, even something like a revenue number, it all fits into this bigger picture of how the city actually works and what challenges it's up against.
Exactly. It reminds us that staying informed about local government isn't just about, knowing what decisions are being made. It's about understanding the context, the limitations, the different priorities they have to juggle. It's complicated.
It's about connecting those dots, seeing how all these things, even if they seem totally separate, are actually influencing each other.
Right. I mean, think about it. That discussion about the $375,000 in revenue, that could have a ripple effect,
Oh, absolutely.
It could affect everything from fixing potholes and keeping the parks clean to public safety initiatives, social services, everything.
And it could even loop back to that zoning case we talked about. Like, could the city's budget situation affect how they look at these development projects? Especially if it involves affordable housing, which can be a whole other can of worms.
Exactly. These things are all interconnected. And that's why these deep dives are so fascinating to me,
Right.
It's about going beyond the surface, getting into those nitty-gritty details, and really wrestling with the complexities of how you run a city. It's not easy.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's about being informed and engaged citizens, right?
Sure.
Understanding that local government isn't just some abstract idea, but something that affects our day-to-day lives in so many ways.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe by talking about these meetings, by making them more accessible, more interesting, maybe we can inspire a few more people to get involved,
Yeah.
to go to a meeting, speak their mind, even run for office themselves.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into these Flint City Council meetings from April 2024, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners are left with today?
Well, I hope they come away with a better appreciation for how important local government really is. I mean, I know it doesn't always sound very exciting, but this is where the real work gets done.
Yeah.
The decisions made at this level, they affect our communities, our neighborhoods, even our own futures. It's important stuff.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And for our listeners who want to keep digging into the inner workings of Flint's local government, we'll be sure to link to the City Council website in the show notes.
Yes.
You can find meeting schedules, agendas, even information on how to actually get involved if you're feeling really ambitious.
And hey, maybe we'll see some familiar faces at the next meeting.
That would be great. A huge thank you to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the Flint, Michigan City Council meetings from April 2024. Make sure to like, subscribe, and let us know down in the comments what city or town you'd like us to deep dive into next. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.